The sun boiled over the Texas plains like a furnace without mercy, turning the dust to ash and the sky to brass. A herd of longhorns thundered across the dry earth, their hooves striking like war drums, eyes wide with panic. A storm was rising behind them, not of rain, but wind and fear, and at the center of it rode Boone McAllister. His coat flared behind him like a tattered flag. His face, weather-worn and fixed in a permanent grimace, bore the grit of a man who had outlived too many things: wars, winters, and women. He barked commands over the stampede, his voice hoarse and battered, rising above the chaos like the last commandment. With a flick of the reins, he veered left, cutting off a runaway steer before it could leap the fence line. The cattle obeyed fear, and they feared him more than the dust devil clawing at their heels. By the time the herd slowed, panting and mud-splattered under the sinking sun, Boone sat in the saddle like a statue, only his eyes alive, two pale flints behind the shadow of his hat brim. That's when he saw the rider. A boy, barely 18, galloped up with a parcel in hand and an awkward fear riding shotgun in his eyes. "Mr. McAllister," he shouted, breathless. "You got a letter. Urgent." Boone took the envelope without a word. He opened it slow, his thick fingers creaking like old barn doors. The seal bore the mark of the governor's office. His jaw tightened as he read. Then again, and again. The wind shifted. He spat into the dirt. Damn politicians. That night, alone in a study lit by the flickering oil lamp and whiskey's bite on his tongue, Boone read the letter a fourth time. "As arranged with your late father, the marriage contract to Miss Eloise Thatcher of Cumberland County stands. Your acquisition of the Thatcher parcel, contingent on matrimony, is effective upon the vows being spoken. The girl arrives in West Fork within the week." A ghost of a scoff escaped him. Eloise Thatcher. He remembered the name. She was the youngest daughter of a bankrupt plantation family, said to have skin like chalk and a disposition to match. Rumor claimed her eyes never met another's, and her smile could sour milk. More than one man had described her as horse-faced, though none had seen her for years. An arranged marriage, relic of old Southern honor. Boone didn't believe in honor. Not after what the war had taken from him. Not after what cholera did to his fiancée, buried in a shallow grave outside Laredo. But land, now that he could believe in. The Thatcher parcel bordered the Brazos and had the only dam water for miles. He couldn't let Doolin or any of the other bastards get to it first. So he signed the bottom of the letter with a bitter twist to his mouth. "Guess I'm getting hitched." 2 days later, Boone rode out toward Comanche Ridge alone. The trail was dry and littered with bleached bones. The heat clung to his skin like a second, miserable hide. Buzzards circled overhead, and once he spotted the glint of movement from a ridge, likely Doolin scouts. His rival had eyes everywhere, and if he caught wind Boone was expanding east, blood would follow. By dusk, he saw the wagon, dust-covered, stationary. A mule nosed the ground listlessly beside it, and then he saw her. She stood beside the wagon like a carved post, tall, unmoving, cloaked head to toe in black linen. A bonnet shadowed her face, and a veil covered it further. She did not look up. "You Eloise Thatcher?" Boone asked, dismounting. Her reply was a nod. Barely. He waited for more. Nothing came. The silence stretched long and sharp. "You mute or just stubborn?" Still nothing. Boone walked around her, trying to see her face through the veil. She shifted subtly to keep it concealed. He caught the briefest glimpse. Pale skin, dark eyes, no trace of a smile. Not ugly, he thought. Just unreadable. He felt irritation coil in his gut. "Look, I don't care what stories you've heard. I ain't looking for love, and I sure as hell don't need company. This is business. You marry me, I get the land, and you get shelter and security. That suit you?" Another nod. She climbed into the saddle behind him without assistance, without a sound. They rode west through the dead plains in uneasy silence, the sky purpling with dusk. Boone could feel her behind him, light as a whisper, but her presence unsettled him more than the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. At camp that night, she built the fire without instruction, cooked with swift, practiced hands, ate little. When he spoke, she did not answer. But she listened, and Boone knew the difference. Later, as he sat sharpening his knife under the moonlight, he watched her from the corner of his eye. She moved like someone who had spent time in dangerous places. Each step measured, each glance a scout's scan of the dark. She wasn't what he'd expected, and that, more than anything, unsettled him. At dawn, they passed a dry creek bed where a half-eaten steer lay rotting. Coyotes scattered at their approach. "Something big did that," Boone muttered. Eloise dismounted without a word and crouched beside the carcass. She examined the tracks. He frowned. "You hunt." She didn't look at him, but for the first time, she spoke, her voice low, rough, but clear. "Bear. Male. Hungry." Boone blinked. The way she said it wasn't a guess. It was knowledge. They rode on. By noon, the sky opened up without warning, a sudden squall of rain and lightning. The horses spooked. The trail turned to slick mud. Boone lost sight of Eloise in the chaos. Then he heard her scream. Spinning his mount, he spotted her halfway down an embankment, half buried under her horse. Boone leapt off, fighting through muck, muscles straining. He reached her, grabbed the reins, and heaved the animal off with a roar. She was soaked, breathless, her veil torn. And for a second, just 1 second, Boone saw her face. It stunned him, not because she was hideous, not because she was beautiful, but because it was a face carved by storms, scarred, fierce, and alive with defiance. A face that told stories no veil could hide. She turned away quickly, pulling the fabric back over her skin. Boone said nothing, but his mind raced. This woman was not what he'd been promised, and that meant someone was lying. He looked ahead, the road home stretching long and uncertain, and he knew then that the real storm was only just beginning. The trail back to McAllister Ranch twisted through badlands and memory. Rain had muddied the path, and thunder still grumbled in the distance like a threat that hadn't quite passed. Boone rode in silence, his eyes flicking to the woman behind him. Eloise clung to the saddle horn, her veil pulled tight again, concealing everything but the weight of what he'd seen beneath it. He didn't speak of it, didn't dare, but the image haunted him, not because it revealed ugliness, but because it hinted at something far more dangerous: truth. By the second day, the sun returned with a vengeance. The floodwaters had receded, leaving the trail slick and treacherous. They moved cautiously through a narrow gorge flanked by jagged rocks and the hush of watching things. Boone's nerves prickled. He caught Eloise glancing upward more than once. Not with fear, with calculation. She knew this land like a gambler knows a loaded deck. "How far you been out this way?" Boone asked, breaking their uneasy quiet. Her head turned slightly. "Far enough to know when we're being watched." The words dropped like lead. Boone slowed his horse, drawing his rifle without flourish. "Who?" She didn't answer. Her gaze remained fixed on the rocks above. A sharp whistle echoed. Not bird, not wind. Boone raised his rifle. A shadow shifted on the ridge. Just one. It paused, tall and silent, framed against the harsh blue sky. Human, but barely. Then it vanished. Boone lowered the barrel slowly. "Scout." She nodded once. "Comanche." "Friendly." "Not yet." They rode on, quicker now. Eloise's silence deepened into something deliberate, as if every word withheld was a thread in some unseen web. At dusk, they made camp by a dying streambed. The fire crackled low, casting warped shadows against the twisted cottonwood. Boone unsaddled the horses while Eloise skinned a rabbit she had snared without instruction. She moved with eerie grace, not delicate, but economical, purposeful. He watched her fingers, sure and practiced, slice clean through flesh and sinew. She'd done this before, many times. "You were raised on a plantation?" he asked, voice casual. Her hands paused. "No," she said simply, then resumed. Boone caught the edge in her tone. Not anger, weariness. The sound of someone who'd long since stopped explaining. "You don't talk much," he muttered. Eloise looked up, her veil catching the firelight like woven shadow. "Most men don't listen." He smirked faintly. "Fair enough." Later that night, Boone awoke to silence. The fire had died to embers. The stars were thick above, cold and watching. And someone else was near. He sat up slowly, hand on the revolver beside him. The horses were still. Eloise was gone. He scanned the darkness, then saw her, standing a few paces from camp, speaking softly in a tongue he didn't recognize. She wasn't alone. A man stood opposite her, tall and lean, clad in buckskin and silence. His face was painted with ash-white streaks, his hair braided with bone. He didn't move like a man. He moved like wind. Boone rose slowly. "We got company." The man turned his head, slowly, deliberately. His eyes met Boone's. Cold, measuring. Eloise said something in Comanche. The man replied in kind, his voice low and without inflection. Then, without warning, he stepped back into the shadows and vanished as if swallowed by the night itself. Boone stared at the empty space, heart thudding. What the hell was that? Eloise returned to the fire, sitting without ceremony. "His name is Gray Hawk." Boone didn't sit. "Friend of yours? No one owns friendship out here. But he won't kill us. Yet. That's comforting." She gave no reply. The next morning, they rose early. Boone felt the weight of unseen eyes all the way through Dead Horse Pass. Eloise didn't look back once. By midday, the land softened, the McAllister Range visible on the horizon like a promise or a threat, depending on who was asking. Boone glanced at Eloise. "Almost there. What's waiting for you on the ranch?" She didn't answer right away. Then softly a cage. "But I've lived in worse." That silenced him more than any refusal. The ranch was a sprawling kingdom of fencing, sweat, and weathered timber. Boone's foreman, Hank Ridley, rode out to meet them, squinting through the dust. "That her?" he asked, eyeing Eloise with open skepticism. Boone nodded. Hank spat. Heard she was uglier and a blister. Boone's expression didn't change. "Don't believe everything you hear." They dismounted, and the ranch hands watched Eloise with a strange mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled disdain. She didn't acknowledge them, didn't flinch, just walked past them like a queen entering hostile territory. Inside the main house, Boone gave her the tour. She noted everything, not with awe, but with evaluation, as if measuring her prison cell. He gestured to her room. "You'll stay here. You want anything different, say so." She stepped inside, scanned the space, and said, "A second lock." Inside, Boone frowned. "You afraid of someone?" "No, I'm cautious of everyone." He gave a short laugh. "You're an odd one. I've been called worse." He leaned on the doorframe. "You've got secrets, Miss Thatcher." She looked him in the eye. "So do you." They stood in silence. Outside, a hawk screamed above the corral. Later that evening, Boone sat alone on the porch, the bottle of rye barely touched. His thoughts drifted back to the girl who wasn't supposed to be remarkable, the girl who spoke Comanche, who walked through firestorms and asked for locks, not flowers. He looked down the road. Greyhawk stood far off, watching. Boone didn't wave. Neither did he blink. They both understood. The woman behind the veil was no stranger to danger. And whatever Boone thought this marriage was going to be, it wasn't that anymore. Inside, behind closed doors, Eloise removed her veil and pressed it to her face. Not in shame, in memory. Then she folded it neatly, tucked it into a chest, and locked it away. The veil had served its purpose. But masks don't protect forever. Not on the frontier. The dry season came early that year. By mid-June, the earth cracked like old leather beneath the hooves of restless cattle, and tempers around the McAllister Ranch burned just as hot. Boone rode the perimeter alone most mornings, restless, sleepless, and no closer to understanding the woman in his house than the day she arrived. Eloise moved like wind through the ranch, present but untouchable. She cooked little, cleaned less, and spoke only when necessary. The hired hands muttered about her in the bunkhouse. Some said she was a witch, others worse. Boone didn't correct them. He didn't know if they were wrong. Still, something about her gnawed at him, like a half-remembered song or a dream that refused to fade. It was Hank who first pushed things too far. One evening, over supper, he slammed a bottle onto the table and barked, "She ain't right, Boone. Wears veils indoors. Talks to shadows. And yesterday, I saw her out near Widow's Ridge alone. That's Comanche land. You want that war again." Boone met Hank's eyes. "You follow her?" "I follow trouble." Boone stood. "Then you better be careful where you step." The silence that followed was thick with unsaid threats. Hank spat and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the lamp flickered. That night, Boone found Eloise standing on the back porch. The moonlight made her veil glow like a ghost shroud. "You went to Widow's Ridge," he said quietly. She didn't turn. "It's sacred ground. It's dangerous ground. All the more reason someone should walk it without fear." He stepped closer. "Hank says you're stirring trouble." Her shoulders stiffened. Hank doesn't understand peace that doesn't come from a barrel. Boone exhaled slowly. "What are you looking for out there?" "Answers," she said. Then softer, "Forgiveness." He frowned. Forgiveness for what? But she said nothing more. 2 days later, smoke rose from the northern ridge. A wagon had been torched, nothing left but char and bone. The settlers who'd been using that trail were gone, their bodies never found. Boone led the search himself. When they reached the scorched earth, Greyhawk was already there, crouched beside the blackened wreckage. Boone approached warily. "Yours." The warrior shook his head. "Not this blood. You know who did it?" Greyhawk's eyes shifted to the trees. "They are watching." Boone scanned the woods. He saw nothing. "They think your woman is one of us," Greyhawk added. "Or worse, spy." Boone's jaw clenched. "She's neither." Greyhawk rose slowly. "Then you must prove it, or lose everything." Back at the ranch, tension hung like the dust in the air, thick, choking, unavoidable. Rumors swirled through the bunkhouse like wildfire. Comanche raids, hidden maps, poison wells. Some claimed Eloise was sending signals with smoke or coded embroidery. The men grew restless. Hank called a meeting. Boone watched it from the porch, arms folded. "She ain't one of us," Hank was saying. "You all know it." Boone's lost his head over a pretty face behind a cursed veil, "But we don't have to." Someone yelled, "What do we do then?" "Send her back," Hank snarled. "Or bury her secrets with her." Boone's boots hit the dirt hard. "Anyone lays a hand on her," he growled, "answers to me." Hank stepped forward, hand twitching near his holster. "You sure about that?" A slow click followed, the unmistakable sound of a hammer pulled back. Everyone froze. Eloise stood in the barn doorway, rifle steady, veil gone. Her eyes were hard as stone, her face calm. "You want truth," she said coldly. "Then hear it." She stepped forward, never lowering the rifle. "I was born to a trader on the edge of tribal land. My mother died young. The Comanche took me, raised me until I was 13. I left because I didn't belong, not there, not anywhere." She scanned the men's faces, her voice steel under silk. "You call me a spy, a witch. But I've buried more kin than most of you will ever know. I came here because I had nothing left. No agenda, no loyalties, just a name that wasn't even mine anymore." Hank sneered. "That's convenient." Eloise's eyes narrowed. "You think I'd burn that wagon? I've seen what real war looks like. This is fear playing dress-up." Boone stepped beside her. "She stays." That's final. The tension broke, but only barely. The men dispersed, some grumbling, others shaken. Hank stayed last, his eyes burning. That night, Boone sat with Eloise beneath the stars. No veil between them. "Why didn't you tell me before?" he asked. "Would you have listened?" she replied. "I'm listening now." She handed him a folded piece of paper, a rough map. Trails, symbols, landmarks. "They're coming from the north. Not Comanche. White men dressed as them. Trying to start something bloody. Someone wants the treaty broken." Boone studied the map. "And you knew this how?" "I still have friends. Even ghosts write letters." The next morning, the valley rang with gunfire. Shots from the ridge, horses screaming, riders charging in feathered war paint that bled red under their collars. Bandits. Boone rallied the ranch hands. Bullets tore through fence posts and shattered glass. Eloise stayed low in the loft with a rifle, her aim steady. When one rider broke through, charging toward the corral, she dropped him with a single shot. By midday, it was over. 6 men dead, 3 captured, all white. Boone rode out to Widow's Ridge that evening. Greyhawk waited there. "You've seen the truth," the warrior said. Boone nodded. "And I'll speak it, loud." Greyhawk handed him a pendant, an old piece of bone carved with sacred markings. "She walks both worlds. That is her gift. And your burden." Back at the ranch, Boone found Eloise in the barn, sleeves rolled, tending a wounded mare. He held out the pendant. He said you walk both worlds. She looked up, tears hidden by the sweat and dust. I never asked to. Boone stepped close, placing the bone in her palm. Maybe not, but we need someone who can. And for the first time, she didn't flinch when he touched her hand. The first frost came early, biting the edges of the prairie grass and painting the hills in silver. The air grew sharp, as if nature itself held its breath, waiting for what would come next. For weeks, the valley had known uneasy peace. The raiders were dead or scattered, their false war exposed. But Boone knew too well, truth might end a battle, but never stop the next one from rising. Eloise had become part of the ranch by then, not by words or grand gestures, but by grit. She worked beside the men, skin blistered, nails cracked, rifle always within reach. The hands no longer whispered. They watched her, silent and steady, as one might watch a thunderhead, uncertain if it meant blessing or ruin. Boone watched too, and the more he did, the more he saw not the stranger he had once resented, but the survivor who refused to yield. But peace is a way of drawing out buried hunger. Word of the failed attack spread fast, and so did rumors. A name came up more than once. Silas Judd, a land broker turned war profiteer who'd vanished from the east under charges of arson, theft, and sedition. Now, it seemed, he'd reemerged in Texas with a new scheme. The bandits hadn't acted alone. They'd been pawns, testing the boundaries. Judd wanted the land Boone sat on, rich in water, unclaimed mineral rights, and wedged between key trade routes. Boone rode to town with Eloise, the map folded in his coat, seeking help from the marshal. But the law was thin, stretched across too many miles and too many secrets. Judd had paid off the local authorities or buried them in paperwork. Justice was a ghost too far gone to catch. That night, back at the ranch, Boone made his decision. He gathered the men by the fire, Eloise standing just behind him. Judd won't stop, Boone said, voice low but sure. He's coming for what we have, and he won't play fair. The firelight flickered across the men's faces, some young, some weathered, all tired. Hank stood up slowly, his face marked by recent scars. He'd changed since the raid. Humbled, not yet soft, but quieter. "What's your play, Boone?" he asked. Boone turned to Eloise. "We strike first." Silence. Then Eloise stepped forward. "He's camped at Dry Mesa. 10 men, maybe 12. He's waiting for legal deeds to be burned in a mysterious fire. If those records disappear, he'll claim our lands unregistered, and no one will stop him." Hank's brow furrowed. "How do you know all this?" She met his gaze. "Because I've been there. Not a spy. As bait. He offered me money. Position. Said a woman like me would be more used beside his fire than in some dusty ranch kitchen." I smiled. I took his whiskey. I took his plans. Boone clenched his fists. "We ride before dawn." Dry Mesa was a skeleton of a place. Burnt-out mining camps, wind-whipped canyons, and stone that whispered when you walked across it. They moved under cover of darkness, 6 riders in total, with Eloise and Boone leading the way. At the ridge, they saw the glow of fires. Tents pitched low, guards posted lazy and drunk on power. Judd sat in the center, surrounded by crates of supplies, dynamite, rifles, papers. Eloise pointed. "That's where he keeps the ledgers. Proof of everything." Boone nodded. "We don't leave until they burn." They moved fast. 2 guards fell without a cry. Hank's knife silent, clean. Eloise crept to the ledger tent, slipping past sleeping men, her breath measured. Boone took the west flank, covering her path. Then, just as she reached the entrance, one of the crates collapsed. A pistol clattered. Shouts erupted. Gunfire split the night. Boone charged from the shadows, rifle snapping. Hank and the others joined, the camp now lit with flames and muzzle flashes. In the chaos, Judd stumbled from his tent, half-dressed, a revolver in hand. He spotted Eloise and froze. "You," he snarled. "Traitor." She didn't blink. "I said I wasn't yours." She fired. The shot struck his leg, spinning him down. Boone sprinted to her side as Judd screamed curses into the dust. "Ledger's burning," Eloise said, eyes never leaving the flames. "Then we're done here," Boone replied. They rode hard, the sky turning gray behind them. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was rising, gold spilling over the hills like a promise long delayed. But the fight left its mark. 3 men were wounded, one gravely. The bunkhouse smelled of gun, oil, and poultices. Hank sat by the fire, arm in a sling. He nodded to Eloise as she passed, not with resentment, but respect. Later, Boone found her in the barn again. She stood at the stall door, her hands resting on the frame. "Why'd you come back?" he asked softly. She turned. "Because this place, it let me be more than just what happened to me." Boone took a step closer. "You don't owe me anything. You could leave. Start over. No one would blame you." She met his gaze, eyes steady. "But would you?" Boone paused. "I want you to stay. Not for the ranch. For me." She said nothing for a long time. Then, "I don't wear the veil anymore. Not because the world changed, but because I did." Boone reached for her hand. We both did. In the weeks that followed, the ranch slowly healed. The townspeople heard what happened on Dry Mesa. Some called Boone a hero, others whispered about the woman who saved his land. None dared challenge them again. Still, Eloise never asked for praise. She worked, she rode, and when the cold winds came howling down from the hills, she stood beside Boone on the porch, watching the horizon, veil long gone, the rifle slung across her back. Some nights, Boone would wake from dreams of fire and gunshot, of dust and blood, only to find her there, already watching the dawn, silent but strong. And though neither of them ever said the word, they both knew what they had wasn't born of love at first sight or fairy tale destiny. It was forged in pain, in battle, in trust earned the hard way. A fire had tried to claim them both, but they chose each other instead. If you were moved by this tale of grit, redemption, and finding truth beyond appearances, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. What would you have done in Boone's place? Let us know below, and keep riding with us for more stories of the forgotten frontier.